At Gate 33, a Marine escort carrying the body of a fallen comrade was stopped cold. Not by an enemy, but by an airline policy no one could explain. Not the jet engines or the boarding calls, not the squeal of suitcase wheels over tile, the sound beneath all that. It was the sound of people trying not to look up. The ticket counter team at Gate 33 worked with their heads angled down just enough to avoid catching anyone's eyes. They typed fast, printed faster, and punctuated each sentence with a practiced next. It wasn't cruelty. It was indifference, the kind that chips at everything it touches. Rourke adjusted the brim of his dress cover and stepped forward. He carried two things: a slim, battered folder with orders from the Department of Defense and a duty that felt heavier than any rucksack he'd ever shouldered. Somewhere on the cargo side of this airport, a transfer case was resting in silence. Inside was Corporal Miguel Alvarez, 21, who used to whistle off-key whenever he was nervous. In the platoon he was Miggs. To his mom in El Paso, he was Mi Sol. To Master Sergeant Rourke, he was a Marine entrusted to him for one last ride home. He moved to the front of the line as calmly as he could, letting the uniform do the talking until words were necessary. The woman at the counter, Denise, her plastic badge announced, saw the cover, glanced down at the ribbons, and then flicked her eyes back to the screen. The movement was almost invisible, but not to Rourke. Years of reading microgestures had taught him what that flick meant. Don't get involved. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Master Sergeant Caleb Rourke. I'm the authorized escort for a fallen Marine traveling under DoD orders. My documentation is in order. I need the boarding pass issued and access to the tarmac, arranged per standard coordination." Denise took the folder. She didn't open it. She tapped. She frowned. The frown wasn't confusion. It was the face of someone locating a path of least resistance. "Sir," she said, and let the word hang for a heartbeat, "we have a security policy for these kinds of arrangements. It requires secondary verification. I need to call it in." "Of course," Rourke said. "Call it in." He kept his voice steady, but inside he counted. Verification was normal. Delays were not. There are delays that honor the mission, the extra minute someone takes to get a flag straight. And there are delays that erode it. He knew the difference. Denise dialed, murmured, nodded to no one, and hung up. Then she put the folder back on the counter and slid it toward him as if it were suddenly radioactive. "I'm afraid the system can't validate your escort authorization number, Master Sergeant. It shows a mismatch. Without a match, I can't issue the pass." Rourke opened the folder, selected the one page he knew by memory, and placed it on the counter with 2 fingers. "This is a signed DoD order," he said. "You can validate it with the 24/7 number listed. The point of contact is on line 3. I've done this before." Denise's smile congealed into a corporate mask. "I understand," she said, which is what people say when they don't. "The system says mismatch, sir. It's policy." He didn't sigh. He didn't lean on the counter. He just let the words settle. "Whose policy?" She blinked. "Company policy." "Show it to me," he said. "Printed or on screen? The specific section that covers denial of boarding to a DoD-designated escort due to an internal mismatch." Denise looked past him. The line behind had grown. Families with strollers, a man in a blazer trying to look unrushed, a high school team in matching hoodies. Rourke felt their attention wobble toward the uniform and snap away, as people do when they don't know if they're witnessing a problem or becoming part of one. "Let me get my manager," she said, and the words were relief dressed as procedure. Rourke nodded. He stepped half a pace back, not yielding the position, but giving the counter its space the way you do with a skittish animal. He breathed, in through the nose, out through the mouth. In a hangar 3 time zones away, some Air Force crew chief had guided a transfer case down a ramp with white-gloved care. Here, a keyboard and a masked smile were threatening to unspool that reverence in under 3 minutes. The manager arrived with the briskness of a man who mistakes motion for leadership. His name tag read, Paul Richter. He had the posture of someone who had never worn anything heavier than a conference lanyard around his neck. He took one look at the uniform, pulled his tie straight, and projected a smile that showed all his teeth and none of his warmth. "Good morning, Master Sergeant," Richter said, landing on the rank like it was a line he'd rehearsed. "Paul Richter, station manager. I understand there's a documentation discrepancy." "There is no discrepancy," Rourke said evenly. "There is a failure to execute the standard process." "Uh-huh," Richter said, drawing the syllables out the way you pull taffy. He turned to Denise. "What's the hold?" "System mismatch on the escort authorization," she said. "Policy requires secondary verification, and without it—" "We cannot proceed," Richter finished, pleased to be completing a sentence. "Sir, if you could step aside while we resolve the internal check, we'll get the next customer started. We appreciate your service, truly, but we do have to follow policy." That word. It was always the same word that tried to strip the meaning from other words. Rourke understood real policy, the kind that carries weight because it's welded to purpose. This wasn't that. This was a word used like a shield. "No," he said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The syllable landed, and a hush moved down the line, pebble to pond edge. "I will not step aside," Rourke continued, voice still calm. "I am escorting Corporal Miguel Alvarez to his family. The orders are valid. The validation number works. You are citing an internal mismatch that you can't show me and a policy you won't display. Issue the pass." Richter's smile cracked at the edges. He'd expected volume he could manage, a scene he could label disruptive. Instead, he had a man anchored where he stood, immovable, not by anger, but by duty. Richter tried a different tool. He gestured down the line. "Sir, you're holding up our other customers." Rourke didn't turn. "I'm holding a promise," he said, and left it there. Someone in the line exhaled hard. A stroller squeaked. A roller bag hit a seam in the tile with a thunk. Small sounds become signals when a room decides to listen. Denise fidgeted, eyes cutting to Richter as if to ask for the next step on a flowchart that had run out of boxes. "Maybe call security?" she said softly. Rourke could feel the moment trying to tip. He thought of a barracks in Helmand, where Miguel Alvarez had done the dumb magic trick with the coin, palming it badly, smiling too wide, always giving away the reveal, and somehow making everyone clap anyway. He thought of a mother arranging chairs in a living room before she knew why she was arranging chairs. He put one hand flat on the counter. "Mr. Richter," he said, using the same tone he'd used on a young lance corporal who was about to make a lifetime's worth of trouble in a single night. "You don't want to make this the story you're in today. Print the pass." Richter didn't answer. He folded his arms into the universal posture of false certainty. The line shifted. The routine of an airport, the river that usually sweeps around obstacles, found its first immovable boulder and swirled. It wasn't about a ticket anymore. It was about whether a quiet ritual that most people never see could survive a smiling wall. The terminal, for the first time that morning, began to pay attention. The space around the counter tightened. Not physically. The same battered stanchions and scuffed tiles, the same digital signs hawking destinations, but morally. Rourke could feel it closing in. The the way a squad feels a firefight coming before the first round goes. The air chilled by the overworked AC turned human. People stopped pretending not to watch. "Sir," Richter tried again, pushing his voice toward authority, and landing somewhere closer to irritation. "Please step aside. Security will be here shortly. We'll process you when our system clears the flag." Flag. The word made Rourke think of the folded triangle he would hand to a mother, smooth as glass and sharp as memory. He thought of white gloves lifting a transfer case with the choreography of reverence. He thought of how fast good words can lose their meaning in the wrong mouths. "I'll remain right here," he said. Behind him, a teenager rustled a hoodie, whispering something to his friend. A woman with a pink suitcase shifted her weight and raised her phone halfway, then lowered it, then raised it again. She wasn't sure if this was theater, tragedy, or something in between. Most people aren't. It's the indecision that keeps crowds docile. Today, indecision wouldn't last. The first voice rose from 5 people back. Clear, steady, young. "He asked to see the policy," it said. "Show him." Rourke didn't turn. The speaker stepped into his peripheral vision anyway. Small, sharp-eyed, hair tucked under a baseball cap, headphones around her neck like an ungainly necklace. She wore a college sweatshirt faded into honesty. Her boarding pass stuck out of a novel dog-eared to page something or other. Zoe Kim, the name would later read on 1,000 reposts. Richter blinked at her. "Ma'am, this is an airline security matter." "Then you should be able to say what the security matter is," Zoe said, not aggressive, just surgical. "He's a Marine escorting a fallen service member. This isn't a seat upgrade." A cough of nervous laughter fluttered through the line. Nervous laughter is the sound of a crowd testing its legs. Denise glanced at Richter, who suddenly found the countertop intensely interesting. "Company policy," he repeated, like a talisman. "Which policy?" Zoe asked. "Internal." "Then it should be written down." Richter's eyes flicked to the left, right, calculating exits from a conversation that had stopped obeying his cues. "Ma'am, filming in this area is prohibited," he said, reaching for the rule he knew would scare most people back into their pockets. Zoe raised her phone in the undecorated matter-of-fact way of the generation that learned a camera can be both shield and megaphone. "It's a public-facing counter in a public terminal," she replied. "I'm not filming any personal data. I'm filming government orders being ignored." It wasn't a zinger. It was a fact. Facts land differently than insults. They stick. The man 2 spots behind Zoe adjusted his vest, the leather worn soft from miles, a patch on the back, sun-faded but readable. Vietnam veteran. He didn't raise his phone right away. He said nothing. He just looked at Rourke's sleeve and then at the counter, as if measuring the distance between 2 kinds of service. Then he slid a flip phone, God bless him, from his pocket, opened it with the defiance of a man who has refused to upgrade anything that still works, and started recording. His name, they'd learn later, was Earl Watkins. A construction foreman in a polo the size of a small sail folded his arms. "You really calling security on a Marine escort?" he said, vocal cords charred from years of coffee and dust. "Hope you practice that sentence before they get here." Denise looked pale now. Policy had been her rope line. It was fraying in her hands. She whispered, "Should I call?" "Call no one," Richter snapped under his breath. Then, louder, for the audience he didn't want, but now had, "Sir, last warning, step aside." Some warnings are theater. This one was a plea wearing a uniform it didn't fit. Rourke thought of the best and worst warnings he'd ever heard. A hiss of incoming that gives you a half-second to get low. the slow-motion certainty of a convoy cresting a ridge that everyone said looked fine on satellite. And the quietest warning of all, the feeling that if you don't hold where you are right now, a line you can't see will move, and next time you reach for it, it won't be there. "No," he said again. "Issue the pass." Zoe's hand wavered for just a moment, then held steady. Confidence is a muscle. It firms when others use theirs. She looked down at her phone, typed a caption she didn't overthink, and hit post. The upload bar crawled like time does at the DMV and in hospital waiting rooms, and then the connection snapped awake, and the video jumped the gate. It landed first with her friends, then with their friends, then with a campus veterans group that had spent months trying to get people to pay attention to anything that wasn't midterms or rent. Their repost added a hashtag, "Honor the Escort." 3 words simple enough to remember, strong enough to carry. Earl lowered his flip phone and patted his pocket, like he'd just sent a fax and wanted to make sure the machine had paper. "It's sent," he told no one in particular, and then to Rourke, "We got your 6, Sergeant." "Master Sergeant," someone corrected from way back, like this was church, and you didn't want to mispronounce the prayer. Security didn't arrive. They were busy a concourse over with a gate change that had turned into a mob snarling at a kid half their size. Besides, someone higher up than Richter and braver than Denise had told the dispatcher to let this one breathe. You don't run a hose at a spark the whole forest wants to see. Rourke didn't smile. He didn't do anything you could screenshot as triumph. He stood the way you stand at a graveside when the chaplain's words braid with the wind and you don't trust your legs except to hold ground. He was not there to win. He was there to witness a promise. "Manager Paul," Denise whispered. "There's a call." "Take a message," he said, defaulting to the only lever left to him. Delay. "It's corporate," she said, and the word corporate, which had given Richter such comfort 2 minutes ago, landed like a gavel now. He swallowed. Put it through. While Denise fumbled with the corded handset as if it were a live wire, Zoe's video leapt from 3 digits to 4. A local reporter DM'd her. A campus veteran wrote, "We're on it," and tagged 3 organizations with eagles and shields in their logos. A guy in a Cubs hat, who had never used Twitter for anything but box scores, found himself typing, "I'm at gate 33. This is not okay." And the algorithm, which cares about nothing except what people care about, inflamed by human attention and the old, deep American habit of bristling at disrespect paid to those who serve, began to carry your chuck honor the escort toward people who had not planned to feel anything this morning. Richter took the call. His face tried to decide between stubborn and scared, and landed on shiny. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I'm aware. We have a policy. There's a mismatch in the—" "Yes, yes, I understand that." Legal said, "No, I haven't seen that. It's not in my binder." He paused, eyes flicking to the uniform. "No, I didn't ask him to step aside. He refused." Another pause. Understood. He hung up slowly, as if cell reception depended on posture. Then he looked at Rourke, with the expression of a man who has just realized the rules he thought were his are, in fact, loaned to him by people he's never met. "Master Sergeant," he began, and stopped when he noticed the new figure in his peripheral vision. A woman in a navy suit, with the kind of calm that comes from putting out fires larger than this. She approached the counter without ceremony, set down a leather portfolio, and offered her hand. "Valerie Shaw," she said, "Regional Communications Director. I am here to fix what we broke." Her hand stayed out. Rourke looked at it. He didn't shake. He didn't refuse. He just let the gesture exist without rewarding it. The crowd didn't cheer. They hushed. Even Zoe, whose camera had been steady as a medic's hands, lowered it a fraction. Everyone knows when the scene shifts from argument to consequence. "Master Sergeant," Valerie continued, voice modulated to the exact frequency of contrition. "We are deeply sorry for this delay, and for the disrespect it communicated. We will print your boarding pass immediately. We've also issued you priority boarding and—" "This isn't an inconvenience to be offset," Rourke said. "This is a duty." Valerie nodded like a penitent. "Understood, and we are going to honor it." "Then do it," Rourke said, not unkindly. "No speeches, no upgrades. Print the pass." Denise's fingers found the keys with a desperation that looked like speed. The printer coughed. It always does, even when the stakes are low. The paper slid out like it had to think about it first. She handed the pass over with both hands, the way people do when they decide an object demands reverence. Before Rourke could take it, Valerie's phone buzzed. She glanced down. Her face didn't just pale, it cleared, like a whiteboard wiped with a schoolteacher's reflex. She held the screen out to no one in particular and to everyone at once. "Headquarters," she said. "The CEO is on her way to this airport." A murmur rose and fell, not quite applause and not yet relief. Zoe's camera caught the moment, the tilt of heads, the way Earl straightened his vest as if addressing an officer. Somewhere across town, a motorcade functioned without being a motorcade. A hurried sedan, and two people in the back seat rewriting a morning. Valerie turned back to Rourke. "We are going to make this right," she said again, and for the first time since she arrived, it sounded less like PR and more like confession. Rourke took the pass. He didn't thank her. He didn't need to. Gratitude would come later, if it was earned. For now, there was a gate to clear, a plane to board, and a transfer case waiting in a belly that, for all the indifference of the world above it, had not forgotten the weight it carried. The line exhaled, as if the room had remembered how breath works. Somewhere, a toddler resumed crying. Somewhere else, a barista shouted, "Double latte!" Life tried to reassert itself, but something had shifted, and everyone could feel it. The way a river feels when it hits bedrock and changes course by a degree that will reshape a canyon, given time. The line, which always moves, began to move again. But the story had stopped being a line at all. It had become a line in the sand. For a moment, it seemed like the air in the terminal had turned into glass, brittle, sharp, ready to shatter with the wrong sound. Then the sound came, the soft digital beep of a phone's recording app starting up. Zoe Kim didn't announce it. She didn't raise the phone high like a protester waving a banner. She simply lifted it chest high, angled it toward the counter, and locked her elbows. In the rectangular frame, Master Sergeant Caleb Rourke was a still figure against the restless backdrop of Gate 33. To the untrained eye, he looked calm. To anyone who'd ever been in a high-stakes standoff, whether on a battlefield or in a boardroom, that calm was a perimeter. "You're being filmed," Richter said, voice dipping into the register of a man trying to regain ground by sounding in control. Zoe didn't flinch. "So are you," she replied, her tone almost polite. The people within earshot reacted the way crowds always do when a clear line is drawn. A shuffle forward here, a tilted head there. Earl Watkins, the Vietnam vet in the leather vest, didn't bother with subtlety. He stepped up next to Zoe, his flip phone now held steady in both hands. The thing was so outdated, it looked like it belonged in a museum. But in Earl's grip, it was an instrument, a weapon, even, aimed at accountability. "This is going live," Earl muttered, not looking at anyone in particular. It wasn't exactly true. His phone could barely send a picture without a 2-minute delay, but the intent was clear. The construction foreman, who had the kind of voice you could hear over a jackhammer, chimed in from the back. "Honor the escort," he said, as if testing the words for the first time. "That's the tag." Zoe heard him, smiled faintly, and typed it under the short clip she'd just taken. Marine escort denied boarding. Orders in hand. No policy shown. Honor the escort. The algorithm is a strange animal. It doesn't care about right or wrong, honor or disrespect. It only cares about engagement. But sometimes, what the people care about is the right thing. Within 90 seconds, the clip had been retweeted by a campus veterans group. In 3 minutes, a local TV reporter had DM'd Zoe for details. Rourke didn't look at any of this. He knew what a camera meant these days, but his eyes stayed forward. He wasn't here to play to the crowd, but he also knew that history, big or small, always had witnesses. And once the witnesses started talking, the story could travel faster than any flight on the departures board. Richter shifted his weight. The cameras changed the math. He was no longer dealing with an isolated disagreement that could be buried under internal matter in a report. This was becoming a public event, and public events had a nasty way of outgrowing their handlers. "Security is en route," Richter announced again, louder this time, playing to the crowd as if to say, "This man is the problem." That was when Zoe made her move. She stepped forward just enough so her voice would carry, but not so far that she was in anyone's personal space. "No," she said, her voice carrying that steel edge that comes when someone's indignation has clicked into focus. "You're holding up the line. He asked you for one thing: show the policy you're citing. If you can't do that, then you're making this about something it's not." Somewhere in the back of the line, a woman with a stroller murmured, "She's right," to no one in particular. Earl grunted in agreement. Richter looked like a man searching for a trap door. "Ma'am, this is a matter of security protocols. Not everything can be shared." "Then say that on the record," Zoe interrupted, turning her phone slightly so his face filled the frame. "Say it exactly. You're denying a Marine escort with valid DoD orders based on a policy you can't produce or define." That's when something subtle happened. The crowd stopped being an audience and became a participant. People weren't just watching anymore. They were aligning themselves, even if only in posture or in the small act of pulling out their own phones. The pink suitcase woman had hers up now. The man in the Cubs cap had hit record. Even the teenager with the hoodie stopped whispering and started filming. It's a peculiar truth. No one wants to be the first to act, but everyone wants to be part of something once it's safe to join. Zoe had made it safe. Earl stepped closer to Rourke. "Son," he said quietly, enough not to be caught on most cameras, "you stand your ground. This isn't about you anymore. It's about what we let happen in plain sight." Rourke gave the smallest nod. Acknowledgement without surrendering focus. Richter, sensing the momentum shift, tried the one tactic left in his arsenal: social pressure. He gestured toward the boarding line for another gate. "Folks, we've got other flights to process. If we could just move this along—" But before he could finish, the construction foreman cut in, his voice booming like a PA announcement. "We'll wait. No one here's in such a hurry they can't watch a Marine be treated with respect." That landed like a gavel. The murmurs turned into full sentences. "That's right. Show him the policy. Print the damn pass." Denise looked stricken. She tapped something on her terminal, glanced at Richter and whispered, "We could just—" "No," Richter said sharply. "We follow procedure." "What procedure?" Zoe shot back instantly. The counter had become a stage, and Richter was losing the scene. His authority was leaking away with every camera click, every whispered hashtag. every pair of eyes locking onto the exchange. And then, the real accelerant arrived. Not from the airline, but from the crowd. A man in a polo shirt with Harris Electric stitched on the chest had been quietly filming since Zoe first spoke up. Without saying a word, he hit post to his 30,000 TikTok followers, many of them veterans or family members of service members. The caption was simple. "They're blocking a Marine from escorting a fallen brother home. Remember this face. Honor the escort." The comments started pouring in immediately. "Name the airline." "Unacceptable. Tag the news." "My dad was an escort once. This makes me sick." Richter didn't know it yet, but his window to control the narrative had closed. The story had already escaped the terminal. Zoe's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her eyes widened. "It's at 50,000 views," she whispered to Earl. Earl grinned, a small, sharp grin that said, "I've been waiting my whole life to see the right people get caught in the wrong lie." Then, the tipping point came from an unexpected place. The woman with the stroller, who had been quietly rocking her baby the whole time, spoke up. "Sir," she said to Richter, "if you're going to call security, call them. But when they get here, you're going to have to explain to all of us why a mother somewhere is waiting for her son's body and you're making that Marine stand here instead of letting him on the plane." The terminal went silent again. Not the brittle silence from before, but the heavy kind that comes when shame enters the room. Richter's mouth opened, but no words came out. Somewhere, in the distance of the concourse, a phone rang on an airline desk. Denise's computer chimed with an incoming message. She read it, blinked twice, and then looked up at her manager. "It's corporate," she said. "They're asking for a live update on Gate 33. Richter didn't move. He knew, everyone knew, that once corporate was watching, the ground under his feet wasn't his anymore. And in that exact moment, every person with a camera knew they'd captured something real. The clip Zoe posted wasn't dramatic in the way the internet usually demands. No shouting, no shoving, just a Marine in dress blues standing still while a manager explained a policy he couldn't name. Yet the quiet was the point. It carried a frequency people recognized. The moment before a country decides what it wants to be. Within minutes, the terminal's invisible ceiling, the one that keeps small stories small, blew off. A local newsroom grabbed Zoe's post and stitched it into a 45-second segment for their streaming app. The anchor's voice had the careful evenness of someone who knows outrage doesn't need help. "At Gate 33, she said, a Marine escorting a fallen service member is being delayed by a reported policy dispute. Witnesses say the airline has not produced the policy. The hashtag #honor the escort is trending." Trending? It's a soft verb that hides a hard truth. People are choosing a side. Zoe's DMs filled with requests. "Can we use your footage? What's the airline? Is he still there?" She answered what she could and ignored the rest. She wasn't trying to be a citizen journalist. She was just the first person who had said out loud what everyone else felt. This is wrong. Earl Watkins didn't have DMs. He had a daughter who texted too fast and a grandson who wrote in abbreviations Earl stubbornly refused to Google. That grandson saw Zoe's clip and recognized the leather vest with the faded patch. "Granddad," he texted, "is that you?" Then, "You're going viral." Earl looked down at his flip phone like it had betrayed him by becoming modern. He typed back in all caps, because he never learned the other way. "Standing with a Marine. Proud of you." His thumb hovered. Then he added, "Proud of Miggs." He didn't know Miguel Alvarez personally, but he knew the shape of the hole a name like that leaves. By the coffee kiosk, the foreman from Harris Electric, name tag reading Rick, refreshed his feed and watched the comments stack into a small wall of solidarity. He didn't consider himself a political man. He considered himself a fairness man. He posted again, this time with a selfie video. "Not much to say," he rumbled. "He's got the papers. They won't show the policy. We're all waiting with him. I'd honor the escort." No soundtrack, no cuts. 500,000 views in an hour because authenticity sometimes looks like a guy in a polo shirt telling the truth. Inside the airline's downtown headquarters, a conference room filled by habit, not by invitation. People arrived holding laptops like shields. A junior analyst pulled up a dashboard with charts tilting aggressively upward. "Engagement curve," she said, pointing. "If this maintains velocity, it hits national news within the hour." A lawyer cleared his throat. "What, precisely, are they saying we did?" The head of customer ops flipped his pen and said, too loudly, "Nothing yet. Just asking for clarity." The word "yet" hovered in the air like smoke. A social media manager fresh out of graduate school suggested the classic corporate move. A non-apology statement using the word "values" twice and "we are looking into it" once. The room considered it. The head of comms shook her head. "If we post a statement while he's still standing there, we look like we're litigating a funeral escort at a ticket counter." The CEO, Laura Benton, wasn't in the room. She'd left her phone on her desk during a budget review 2 floors up. When it buzzed for the 3rd time with the same subject line, Gate 33, she stepped out and called the board chair. "We're not arguing this on Twitter," she said. "I'm going to the airport." Back in the terminal, Valerie Shaw fielded calls in quick, quiet bursts. She'd been brought in many times to stop bad stories from becoming worse ones. She understood this one wasn't about a complaint. It was about an oath. She could feel the geometry of the scene changing. Fewer eyes on her, more on the Marine. Good, she thought. Let him be the fixed point. Let everything else move around that. Denise watched the printer inch out boarding passes for strangers who had no idea the building around them had shifted. She felt the small shame of a person who did exactly what she was trained to do, and discovered that training had prepared her for everything except decency. "I should have called a supervisor sooner," she thought, then realized she had. And that hadn't helped. Richter was losing the one superpower rote managers cling to, the power to define a thing by naming it. "Policy," he kept repeating, while the crowd quietly built a dictionary that said otherwise. Every time he said policy, someone else said promise. Every time he said security, someone else asked, for whom? The spell was broken. The airport police finally ambled into view, not with batons and barked commands, but with the wary posture of men who had watched the feed before walking over and had zero interest in becoming a meme. The senior officer tipped his head to Rourke, who returned it with the precise respect of equals in different uniforms. "We good here, Master Sergeant?" the officer asked. "We will be," Rourke said. The officer nodded. "Then we'll let you do your job." Zoe's latest post crossed a new boundary. National veteran organizations retweeted with simple captions. "We're watching." A Gold Star family account posted a photo of a folded flag on a mantle. "When our son came home, the escort was treated like family. This matters." It wasn't rage content. It was testimony. People listened to testimony. At a sports bar 2 concourses away, a silent TV looped highlights from last night's game. The ticker at the bottom cut in, "Marine escort delayed at Gate 33. Airline to respond." The bartender, an Army Reserve specialist between drill weekends, turned up the sound, then looked at the 3 travelers nursing airport beers and said, "That's this airport. One of them, in a suit that fit too well to be off the rack, glanced up, frowned, and texted someone, "Do you know about Gate 33? The someone he texted worked for a senator. This is how the country talks to itself now. Diagonally, in hops, through strangers who don't feel like strangers because they share a value the culture hasn't quite managed to make uncool." Zoe's phone lit with a new message, not a request, but a thanks. It was from a woman named Elena Alvarez. The last name punched Zoe in the chest. Miguel's mother? The message was short. "I'm watching. Thank you for seeing him." Zoe typed and deleted twice before sending, "We see him. We see you." A TSA supervisor, hearing the phrase policy dispute for the 10th time that hour, walked over, scanned the orders, and nodded. "Everything checks," he said quietly to Valerie. "On our side, he should already be past the counter." Valerie thanked him. She knew it. He knew it. Rourke knew it. But knowing isn't the lever. The lever is admitting it, fixing it, and doing it in a way that teaches everyone in earshot a lesson they won't forget. The hashtag had escaped the airport ecosystem. A morning show host in New York previewed the clip before a commercial break and looked into the camera with that practiced, performative sincerity American TV perfected. After the break, a Marine, a promise, and a question about who we are. It was a little schmaltzy and a lot effective. By the time Laura Benton's car hit the airport road, Zoe's video had crossed 1 million views. Earl's grandson had texted, "It's on TV." Rick from Harris Electric had been offered 2 free beers and 1,000 high fives he didn't want. Denise had stopped speaking and started listening. Richter had stopped gesturing and started sweating. And Master Sergeant Caleb Rourke had not moved an inch. A digital wildfire doesn't burn because it's loud. It burns because people recognize the tinder. A country that asks its young to do hard things owes them small mercies when they come home. That's not partisan. That's American. The tipping point isn't a number of views. It's a feeling that the tables have turned and the story has decided how it wants to end. The question is whether the people in charge will accept that ending or fight it like a rip current, exhausting themselves on principle that isn't. As the automatic doors sighed open to admit the CEO, the crowd didn't cheer. They did something more powerful. They made room for accountability. They widened the corridor like an honor guard for an idea. Valerie Shaw had seen plenty of messes. Some were loud, fist-pounding, table-slapping, apology on live TV loud. Others were quiet, the kind that seep into a brand like damp into drywall. Gate 33 was both, quiet in sound, loud in meaning. She'd stepped in early, told the printer to spit a boarding pass, and even that felt insufficient, like handing out bottled water at a house fire. She approached Rourke again, this time without the extended hand. "Master Sergeant Rourke," she said, "we're printing the pass. I'm also arranging tarmac access now, and contacting ground operations to—" "Good," he said. No warmth, no hostility. An inventory word, good. Valerie didn't flinch. "And I owe you an apology on behalf of this station." He didn't nod, didn't give her the little absolution people in her job usually crave. "There's a mother waiting to hold a flag. That's the only clock I'm on." "I understand," she said, and meant it. "I won't waste your time." In her ear, a colleague rattled updates. Corporate had gone from curious to alarmed. Legal was drafting statements no one would read. The board chair had asked a deadly simple question. What is the policy? And the answer, which sat like a trap in an inbox somewhere, was that there wasn't one. Not like this. There were procedures for chain of custody, for coordination with the military liaison, for dignity at every step. But there was no policy requiring a denial when a database hiccuped. That came from training gone sideways and managers too scared to overrule a screen. Valerie stepped to the counter and lowered her voice to Denise. "We're done citing anything internal. You will support the escort. Full stop." Denise swallowed and nodded. Her eyes had that glazed look of a person making a permanent note in themselves. Richter hovered, the nervous gravity of a man who feels leadership slipping like a ring on wet fingers. "We still have to protect the system," he insisted. Valerie turned her head slowly. "What you protect reveals what you value." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The line wasn't a mob, it was a choir, and the note they held was agreement. She pivoted to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We failed here," she said plainly, and a small ripple went through the gathered phones. "Admissions are rarer than fireworks. We are correcting it now, and we are reviewing our procedures so we don't make this mistake again." A man near the back called out, "What's to review? Let him do his duty." Valerie didn't disagree. "You're right," she said. "Let's do that." The airport police, content to be wallpaper, stayed in their lane, present, watchful, unneeded. TSA nodded once more and stepped back. Even the barista who had briefly considered selling Gate 33 lattes stopped mid-joke and just watched, because jokes have their place, and this wasn't it. Valerie's phone buzzed with a text she didn't ignore. "CEO inbound, 8 minutes out." She exhaled through her nose. She'd worked under leaders who sent statements like umbrellas into hurricanes. Laura Benton was not that kind. Laura walked into the weather. "Master Sergeant," Valerie said, "our CEO is on her way. She's coming here." Rourke's face didn't change. The crowd reacted for him, a murmur that wasn't excitement so much as solemn approval. America loves leaders who show up in person when it matters. It forgives a lot when it sees someone take a hit face to face. Denise printed the pass again, not because she needed to, but because ritual matters. She handed it over carefully. Rourke accepted it like he was receiving a folded flag. With intent, with care. "Thank you," he said, his first concession to nicety since the standoff began. Valerie didn't try to make it more than it was. "Ground operations is ready when you are," she said. "We'll coordinate with the captain and crew." "Make sure the ramp is clear," Rourke replied. "No pictures of the transfer case." "Already done." She had done it. Muscle memory from other crises taking over. Some instincts are learned. Others are built from scars. A reporter arrived, not one of the national faces, but a local with a good nose and a better sense for tone. She didn't shove a mic into anyone's face. She stood near Zoe. "Did you expect it to get this big?" she asked. Zoe shook her head. "I expected him to be treated right." The reporter smiled a little. "That'll play," she said, and meant it in the best way. Richter tried one last time to salvage a scrap of authority. "I'll coordinate media," he announced, as if reasserting control could change the fact that he'd lost it. Valerie quietly said, "You won't. There will be one voice today, and it won't be yours." He looked wounded. Then something in his shoulders softened, the first honest moment he'd had all morning. "I thought I was doing my job," he said, not defensively, just a man blinking at the moment he realized the map he'd followed was upside down. Valerie didn't sharpen the blade. "Then your job changes today," she said. "Mine too." Phones lifted just an inch as the automatic doors whooshed open. Laura Benton entered at a fast walk that stopped short of a run. Rumpled suit, flats instead of heels, no entourage, one folder. She looked first at Rourke, then at the crowd, then at the counter where the word policy had been used like a wall. You could see her making the calculation good leaders make. I am here to be responsible. Not right. Master Sergeant, she said, stopping a few feet away, hands visible, posture unthreatening and unafraid. I'm Laura Benton. I run this airline. What happened here is on me. It was a first sentence that did 4 jobs at once. Named the person in charge, accepted the fault, grounded the conversation in accountability, and robbed the moment of the corporate dodge that poisons apology. The crowd didn't clap. They stilled. Valerie stepped back a half pace. Her role had shifted to keeper of the perimeter. The conversation was now a matter of public record. Benton continued. There is no policy that justifies what happened to you, to Corporal Alvarez, or to his family. She didn't say, we're sorry for any inconvenience. She didn't say, if you were offended. She said, this is wrong. And the line, which had learned to brace for hedges, exhaled. Rourke held her eyes. Then, fix it. I am, she said. First, we will get you and Corporal Alvarez where you need to go without delay. Second, we will build a procedure that prevents any employee from hiding behind a screen when the right answer is to stand up and do the right thing. We will call it the Alvarez Protocol. She turned slightly so the phones could hear it without feeling addressed. It will be mandatory training from gate to cockpit, to my office. Someone near Zoe whispered, That's it. That's the clip. Zoe didn't move. Her camera didn't shake. She had found what she came for without knowing she came for it. Valerie watched faces change. Denise's relief collapsing into remorse. Richter's defensive mask sliding off to reveal a person who might yet learn. The foreman's nod. Earl's thin smile of recognition. Leadership isn't theater. It's the willingness to stand where the tomatoes are thrown and not duck. Ground operations is ready, Valerie said softly, and Benton nodded. Then let's go, the CEO said. No ceremony now, just movement, the right kind. News doesn't move in straight lines anymore. It ricochets from phone to TV to text thread to a boardroom where someone who never opens social media is told by someone who lives there, we need to act. In the hour between the boarding pass printing and Laura Benton's arrival, the ricochet had reached places that turned moments into mandates. In a glass-walled office 200 miles away, a staffer briefed a senator with a service committee seat. It's a optics nightmare with a justice corps, she said. No actual national security issue. Just a non-policy invoked to avoid responsibility. The Marine is Master Sergeant Caleb Rourke. The fallen is Corporal Miguel Alvarez. The senator didn't smile often, but he smiled now without pleasure. Call the airline, he said. Not to pressure, to remind. In a small ranch house in El Paso, Elena Alvarez watched her living room fill with family, who brought casseroles because they couldn't bring her son. The TV showed the Gate 33 clip. Her sister whispered, That's him. Elena's hands tightened on a tissue. That's the man who called me, she said, remembering Rourke's voice, even respectful, unyielding when grief wanted to break every bone of discipline. He said he would bring Miguel home. She looked at the TV. He will. At airline headquarters, the board joined a hastily convened call. A member asked the blunt question good boards are paid to ask, how many other places could this happen in our system? The head of operations answered with a truth that kept him employed. Anywhere we've taught people to trust screens over people. Silence followed, the dangerous kind. Then the chair said, Fix that. No one asked how much? Yet. Sometimes money is a footnote to the cost of not spending it. Meanwhile, investors, jumpy by nature and trained by years of volatility, pinged the IR inbox with polite versions of what on earth? One fund manager, a West Point grad, didn't bother with polite. "I don't care about a one-day dip," he wrote. "I care about whether you understand the difference between a policy and a promise." At the airport, Valerie choreographed the next moves with the precision of a stage manager cueing a peaceful play. "Clear a path to the jetway," she told ground ops. "Coordinate with the captain. Crew in dress uniform if available. Passenger announcement brief. No phones filming the case, and I want that ramp empty." She asked TSA for an escort, not because she needed muscle, but because uniforms recognize one another and respect travels fastest that way. The captain of the outbound flight, a former military pilot whose calm voice could land a plane through thunder, gathered his crew. "We have honored cargo," he said. "We will keep the cabin quiet. We will announce without flourish. We will set the tone." The flight attendants, who have seen every kind of human at their worst altitude, nodded. The lead, a woman who kept a rosary in her bag and a whistle in her pocket, wrote Alvarez on a sticky note and pressed it to the galley wall as if it were a name she needed to carry with the drinks. But Benton had already decided the commercial flight wasn't enough. "Get a company aircraft ready," she told Ops. "Crew it now. We're moving him privately." Ops hesitated, not at the decision, but at the speed. "Fuel, crew rest, flight plan. Handle it," she said. "This is not about efficiency. It's about honor." Her phone buzzed with the senator's call. She didn't dodge it. "Senator," she said, "I'm at the gate. We are correcting this." The senator didn't grandstand. He simply replied, "Good. Call me when the Marine is on his way. And send me your policy draft. You're going to need it in other hands." It wasn't a threat. It was governance. Benton hung up and faced the crowd, not to perform, but to inform. "We are moving Master Sergeant Rourke and Corporal Alvarez on a separate aircraft," she said, voice carrying not because she shouted, but because people chose to listen. "We will honor the transfer quietly. We will not make content out of grief." A single clap sounded and died. This wasn't a clapping moment, replaced by a low murmur of assent. Zoe kept filming, but she lowered the angle to frame people rather than faces. She had learned in an hour more about ethics than some learn in a semester. Bearing witness isn't the same as mining sorrow. A young gate agent from 2 counters over leaned toward Denise. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and meant it in a personal way, not as a corporate script. Denise nodded. "Me too." Then, surprising herself, she added, "I'm going to ask to retrain on this. For real." It sounded like a small vow, but small vows, if kept, become culture. Richter stood very straight, the way people do when letting their spine, not their voice, do the apology. He stepped toward Rourke. "Master Sergeant," he said, each syllable careful. "I was wrong." Rourke measured him with a gaze that had no malice in it. "Then, don't be again," he said. It was not a cut. It was instruction. 2 pilots in Navy uniforms took position at the head of the cleared path. They didn't give orders. They looked like what they were, custodians of a transit that should feel like church. The airport noise dimmed, or maybe it didn't, and everyone simply tuned it out. The crowd parted. Phones lowered. Hats came off. The foreman's hand went to his chest without thinking, the way men of his generation were taught in Little League and never unlearned. When the ground crew began to move, the choreography looked practiced because it was. Respect is a ritual so good it bears repeating without becoming rote. The transfer case would not come through the terminal. It would move on the tarmac from cargo to the waiting aircraft. But this path, from counter to jetway, mattered too. It was where the living took responsibility for the dead. Benton walked beside Valerie. "Once they're in the air," she said, "I want a draft of the protocol tonight. The Alvarez protocol is not a plaque. It's a practice. We will build it with the people who know this best. Military liaisons, escorts who've done it, Gold Star families. No euphemisms, no branding. The only adjective we're allowed to use is dignified." Valerie nodded. "We'll write it like a checklist and teach it like a creed." "Good," Benton said. "And Paul?" She turned to Richter, who braced as if waiting for a formal reprimand. "You'll help build it," she said. He blinked. "Ma'am?" "You saw where it breaks," she replied. "Now you'll help make it unbreakable." The senator texted, "Watching your live feed. Proud of how you're handling this. Keep going." Benton didn't reply. She didn't need the pat on the back. She needed a safe takeoff. Rourke finally moved. He didn't stride. He didn't march. He walked the way Marines walk when carrying something heavy you can't see. Valerie, 2 steps behind, could feel the lesson radiating outward. Sometimes leadership looks like going first. Sometimes it looks like stepping aside. As Rourke reached the jetway, he paused. Not long. Just long enough to look back at the line that had become a fellowship. He gave a small nod. It wasn't for the cameras. It was for Zoe, for Earl, for Rick, for the woman with the stroller, for Denise, for all the strangers who decided that decency is a team sport. Then he disappeared down the corridor toward the plane that would not carry tourists today. Only a promise. On the tarmac, the late-morning sun turned aluminum into mirrors. A small company jet sat ready, not sleek enough to look indulgent, not big enough to look imperial. It looked purposeful, which was the point. A crew of 4 stood at crisp attention. The captain, former Air National Guard, had asked Ops for a minute with her team before boarding. "This is a transport of honor," she said. "We will speak softly, move deliberately, and treat this as if 1,000 eyes were on us, even if none are." Inside the terminal, Benton addressed the gathered without microphones. "I'm going with them," she said. Heads tilted. CEOs don't usually leave their buildings except to go to other buildings. "I will escort Master Sergeant Rourke and Corporal Alvarez," she added, "and I will speak to the family when we land. Our failure began here. Accountability continues there." Valerie handled the logistics without letting the edges show. She handed Benton a printed 1-pager, not a statement, a checklist. Liaison contact, receiving honors team, family point of contact, ground transport, privacy measures. "You'll have a quiet room on arrival," she said. "No cameras?" Benton nodded. "Good. The only record we need is theirs." As Rourke approached the private gate, a ground ops lead briefed him in the crisp shorthand he knew well. "Ramp is clear. Case will be transferred under cover. Flag will remain oriented forward. Crew will stand fast." Rourke listened, and a small corner of his jaw unclenched. Competence is a kind of kindness. Zoe stopped filming. It wasn't that the story was over. It was that this part didn't belong to her. She stepped back next to Earl. "You going to keep recording?" she asked. He shook his head. "Some things are for being present," he said. "Not for being posted." She smiled. She'd come to the same conclusion from the other end of a generational bridge. Denise swallowed and walked toward Rourke. "Master Sergeant," she said, voice almost a whisper. He paused. "I'm sorry." The words were spare, no garnish. He held her eyes and gave one short nod. "Do better for the next one," he said. It didn't absolve her. It gave her a job. Benton joined Rourke at the jetway door. "Permission to walk with you?" she asked, a little formal, a little right. He inclined his head. Walk." They emerged into the bright. The aircraft door stood open, a rectangle of shadow. On the ramp, a small details team prepared to move the transfer case from cargo truck to plane. They wore reflective vests over uniforms and solemnity over everything. The world loves a ceremony. The military loves a ritual. This was neither and both, the quiet labor of respect. Benton didn't speak. She wanted to. She wanted to narrate her contrition, to turn her apology into sentences like paving stones. She did not. She walked, and that was her sentence. The case moved with deliberate slowness up the lift. There is a speed at which reverence lives. It is slower than impatience and faster than lethargy. Rourke stood at the foot of the lift and came to attention. A breeze lifted the corner of the flag and laid it back down like a hand smoothing a collar. The captain saluted. The crew followed. Benton did not salute. It wasn't hers to give. She placed her hand over her heart and said nothing. After the case was secured, Rourke boarded. He didn't sit first class. There was no class. He took the forward-facing seat closest to the cargo bay bulkhead. Benton took the aisle across from him, not as a peer, but as a witness. The door closed, the engines spooled, the ground slid away. At 12,000 feet, Benton spoke. "I'm sorry," she said again, this time not to a crowd, but to a man who had earned the right to look out the window as if she weren't there. "I can catalog all the departmental mistakes that led to this," she said, "but there's a simpler truth. We designed a culture where people were more afraid of being wrong than of doing wrong." Rourke turned. "Fix that," he said. "Build a culture where the right thing is the safe thing." She nodded. "The Alvarez Protocol will be that." He almost smiled. "Write it so no one can hide in it." She glanced at the folder on her lap, a blank page where marketing notes would normally go. "We'll build it with the people who've carried these cases," she said. "Will you? Would you be willing to consult?" He held her gaze. "I'll tell you what matters. The rest you'll have to learn by standing where you stood today." They flew in a half-silence that felt like church after the hymn ends and before the doors open. Benton drafted the bones of the protocol in a plain text email. No bullet points, just promises turned into instructions. Escorts do not wait behind customer service queues. Managers step in to clear processes, not to block them. Verification lines are live and prioritized. All staff receive training in the ritual dignity of transfer. No employee may cite internal policy to impede an escort with validated orders, and any mismatch triggers escalation upward, not outward. She stopped. She deleted a sentence about brand values. She wrote instead, "We will not use this to market ourselves." The flight landed in a smaller city where the runway felt like a road, and the terminal like a living room. A Marine detail stood by in dress blues. A hearse waited. A handful of people who didn't need to be told not to film didn't film. Benton stepped off the plane behind Rourke and stood aside. Elena Alvarez approached, flanked by family whose grief had already moved through the loud stages and settled into the quiet one that lasts. Rourke met her halfway, saluted, and handed her the flag he had guarded with his posture for hours and with his vow for days. "On behalf of a grateful nation," he began, the words not rote because gratitude is the one script worth repeating, "please accept this flag, which symbolizes the honorable and faithful service of your son." Elena's hands shook. Rourke steadied them without taking any weight from her. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing him home." He shook his head. "It was my duty." She looked into his face and saw, the way mothers see, the thing a man won't say. It was more than that. Benton remained a respectful distance away. When Elena finally looked at her, Benton stepped forward. "Ma'am," she said softly, I am the CEO of the airline that failed your son's escort this morning. I am here to apologize to you directly." Elena studied her. The suit, the lack of pretense, the edges of distress. "Will you fix it? So no other mother stands where I stand with this question?" Elena asked. Benton's voice did not waver. "Yes," she said. "We will." The procession moved, not grand, not small, just right. The case was transferred with the precise choreography the nation learned from Dover. White gloves, measured steps, absence of commentary. The hearse door closed with a sound that should be too ordinary for such a sacred moment, and yet wasn't. Benton turned to Rourke. "I'll return on a commercial flight," she said. "You have a family to stand with." He nodded. "I'll stand." She watched him go and felt the cost of leadership. Not the public part, the private one. The knowledge that you will spend political capital and actual capital on things people can't fit into a spreadsheet, and you will have to defend that spending with a straight back and the stubbornness of a better ancestor. The town wasn't on most maps people keep in their heads, but it had everything a map of home should. A VFW hall with plaques older than the new houses, a diner where the waitress knew how you wanted your eggs, a high school gym with a scoreboard that stuck on eights. It had a main street that could host a parade or a memorial with equal grace. That week, it hosted both. The procession rolled past storefronts where hand-painted signs read, "Thank you, Miguel," and "Welcome home." There is always argument somewhere else about whether those words are too much or too little. In this town, they were exactly right. Children stood in their Sunday clothes on a Thursday. Elderly men took off caps that had lived on their heads since the war, before the last war. The fire department hung a flag between two ladder trucks, the kind of gesture that can slide toward spectacle and didn't, not here. At the church, the pews filled early. The pastor offered a homily that got three things correct. It was short, it was specific about a young man's kindness and mischief, and it refused to pretend that words can fix what a folded flag does to a mother's hands. The Marines moved like a metronome set to reverence. The 21-gun salute cracked the sky and then surrendered it back to silence. Rourke stood with the family, not apart and not in front. He had learned over years of ceremonies that the escort's job in the final third is to disappear into the exact right place. Close enough to take weight if someone falls. Far enough not to block a face from a last look. When the moment came, he stepped forward at the cue that only the few in dress blues heard and kneeled to present the flag. Elena's eyes met his. She whispered, "Tell me something about him." Rourke didn't reach for a speech. "He whistled off-key when he was nervous," he said. "Drove the platoon nuts. We loved it." Elena laughed through the sound that isn't laughter and squeezed the flag. The town's honor guard led the family to the cemetery as the sun angled itself to make shadows long. Benton stood at a distance where intention is seen, but self isn't centered. She'd flown back commercial and driven the last mile herself. No press, no photographers, just a woman who ran a company standing where it had failed, and where it was trying to begin again. Zoe came too, not with her phone out, but with a casserole handed awkwardly in the vestibule because her mother told her, "That's what you do." She hugged Elena, a quick, respectful hug, and whispered, "We saw him." Elena's thanks felt weighty, like a coin pressed into a palm. Earl sat in the back row and took his cap off again and kept it off, as if putting it back on would be too much like putting away a duty he wasn't done with. After the final prayer, the crowd thinned the way crowds do, to murmurs, to wind through trees, to a handful of people who hold the ending. The Marines departed in twos. The hearse left. The sun shifted. Rourke remained. He walked to the headstone, still fresh enough that the letters felt like a decision. He reached into the inside pocket of his dress coat and pulled a heavy brass challenge coin engraved with the eagle, globe, and anchor. It had lived there through deployments and funerals and one improbable World Series parade he'd attended between tours. He pressed it into the soft earth with his thumb until the coin's rim met the dirt. He straightened, came to attention, and saluted. A clean, precise gesture that said what words cannot without asking them to. "Mission complete, Marine," he said, voice low enough that only the grass learned the sentence. "Rest easy." Benton watched from the path and understood that some apologies end here. Others start here. She took out her phone and typed a note she would send later to her entire company. "Today, we witnessed the cost of a small failure and the power of a correct response. The Alvarez Protocol will be our standard, not because it plays well, but because it is right. We will not tell this story in ads. We will tell it to one another in training rooms and break rooms until no one at a counter has to make a choice between a screen and a Marine again." At the VFW Hall reception, there were paper plates and potato salads, and the kind of coffee that tastes like consolation more than caffeine. Zoe sat with Earl and listened to a story about a tunnel rat in 1969 that she would never fully grasp, but would honor by not asking for more than he offered. Rick from Harris Electric hugged Rourke in a way that would have been awkward had it not been so sincere. "If you ever need a generator," Rick said, "I got you." It was both a joke and a promise. Americans trade in those. Elena found Benton near the doorway and took her hand, not to shake, but to hold. "You kept your word," Elena said simply. Benton nodded. "We will keep it again," she replied. Elena looked at the small crowd. "That's how a country stays a country," she said. "It sounded like something you put on a plaque. It felt like something you put in a policy." Night settled. Not dramatic, not loud. The family went home. The Marines folded their uniforms into garment bags and drove to the hotel where they would sleep between days defined by a purpose too big to fit into hotel rooms. Rourke sat on the edge of his bed and took off his shoes with the care of a man who has learned that even small motions can be a kind of prayer. He set his alarm for early, not because he needed to, but because he didn't know how not to. In the morning, the town would go back to school, back to work, back to routines that kindness stitches together after grief tears them. But something would remain changed. A story they had all joined. A hashtag they would forget to use because they would be too busy living by it. 2 weeks later, a message went out to every inbox in the airline with a subject line so unadorned it looked wrong. The Alvarez Protocol. No banner, no branding. A PDF in plain fonts with sections that read less like a manifesto and more like a checklist written by someone who had carried a case and had no patience for flourish. When a DoD escort presents orders, do not route through standard queues. Page a supervisor immediately. Your job is to clear, not to question, unless an explicit red flag is present, and if it is, you escalate upward, not outward. Verification lines. Maintained 24/7. Response within 60 seconds. If the system isn't matching, the system is wrong. People are right until proven otherwise. Dignified handling. No images of transfer cases. Crew briefed. Announcements sober, factual, short. Ramp personnel trained in flag etiquette. All unnecessary movement stops during transfer. Authority. Any employee may override a process that conflicts with this protocol without fear of discipline. Failures to honor the protocol will be investigated at the VP level. Training. Taught by a panel including escorts, Gold Star families, military liaisons, and our own ground crews. No euphemisms, no marketing. An optional reading list followed. Testimonies from Dover, a short history of dignified transfers, 2 first-person essays from escorts who explained what it feels like to be the hinge between a battlefield and a living room. At the end, a single line. This is not a policy to be cited. It is a promise to be kept. Denise read it all. She printed it. She taped it inside her locker door. She asked her supervisor to put her on the first training cohort. In the session, a Marine with salt at his temples explained why pace matters. Why an extra 5 seconds to smooth a flag isn't delay, but dignity. Denise wrote that word in capital letters and underlined it twice. At the end of the day, she found Rourke's email in the company-wide thank you thread and typed, "I won't forget again." She didn't hit send. She realized the better message would be to live it. Richter sat through the same training without the armor he used to wear to meetings. He listened to a Gold Star mother talk about the day a stranger in a uniform knocked on her door, and how every interaction after that either turned the volume down on the worst sound in the world or turned it up. He raised his hand and asked, "What should we say at the counter?" She looked at him for a long time and said, "Say, 'I'm with you.' Then do it." He wrote it down and didn't forget it. Valerie helped film a 10-minute internal video, not glossy, not overproduced, where ground ops walked through a transfer in daylight with narration that sounded like calm instruction, not a commercial. She fought to keep marketing out of it, and she won. "If we ever put this on social," someone suggested. "We won't," she said. "If we do our jobs, someone else will tell the story for us, and we won't need credit." Benton took meetings she wouldn't have taken before, with mid-level managers who had ideas, with gate agents who had complaints, with a group of pilots who wanted scripts revised to be less performative and more human. She pushed a memo that gave frontline employees more discretion and fewer scripts. She didn't announce a culture shift. She enacted one by changing what got people praised. Outside the company, letters arrived. Not emails. Letters on paper. The kind people send when they want words to have weight. A high school student wrote in looping penmanship that he had never thought about who carried a soldier home and that he planned to enlist. A retired airline agent wrote to say she once bent a rule on a night when no one was looking and how she slept better because of it. Elena wrote a note addressed to the people at the counter, in which she said, "When you say next, please remember that sometimes the person in front of you is carrying someone who can't speak for themselves. Speak for them." The letter went up on break room bulletin boards without a directive. Zoe published a long post, not a thread, about what she learned. That filming can be a form of care when used to hold a line, rather than to harvest outrage. That stepping forward with words like "show the policy" can turn a bystander crowd into a community. That turning the camera off when it's time is as important as turning it on. Her professor asked if she would present to the media ethics class. She did. She used words like stewardship and consent, without rolling her eyes at herself. Earl's grandson printed a screenshot of the first "Honor the Escort" post and framed it for his grandfather. "We made the right kind of trouble," the grandson said. Earl grunted. "We stood where we should," he corrected. He took the frame to the VFW hall and hung it next to a photo of men in jungle fatigues, grinning like boys they weren't anymore. Rick from Harris Electric didn't change the world. He fixed a church sound system that kept buzzing during vows. He quietly comped the work for the Alvarez family's parish. "Call it a warranty issue," he told the priest. The priest laughed. "On generosity?" "On community," Rick said. Rourke returned to base and found a note in his inbox from a private he'd counseled once about going home right. "I watched Gate 33. I think I get it now." Rourke replied with a single line. "Getting it is the start. Keeping it is the work." He went for a run at dawn, because that's when the world is quiet enough to hear what you owe it. On a clear Friday, 2 months after the funeral, he drove back to the cemetery alone. He walked to Alvarez's grave and saw that someone had polished the coin without removing it. A small miracle of respect. He stood there a while. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Wind in trees can carry messages both ways if you've earned the right to believe that. He turned to leave and saw a laminated card tucked under a nearby stone. It was a printed copy of the Alvarez Protocol's first page, edges bent by weather, tape yellowing, the words still legible. He didn't know who had put it there. Maybe a cousin, maybe a stranger, maybe someone who had needed to say to the earth itself, "We will not forget how to behave." As he reached the path, his phone buzzed, a number he didn't recognize. He let it go to voicemail, then listened. It was Laura Benton. "We've rolled the protocol out," she said. "We did the training. We wrote the overrides. We changed the incentives. It will never be perfect, but it will be better. I wanted you to know, not from a press release, but from me." He deleted the message after saving the number, not because he was done with it, but because he didn't collect apologies like trophies. He kept promises like tools. That evening, the airline quietly updated a page on its website. Not a homepage carousel, not a video, just a paragraph in a section people rarely read. It described the Alvarez Protocol in neutral language and included a note. "We are grateful to the families and service members who guided this work. We carry your instruction forward. No link to share. No hashtag. Sometimes humility is invisible on purpose." At a small airport on a different coast, a gate agent looked up from her screen as a Marine approached with orders in a worn folder. She stood, not because someone told her to, but because her body knew before her brain did. "I'm with you," she said. Then she did what the protocol told her. She overrode a system that was wrong. She made calls that moved faster than excuses. She cleared a path that felt like a prayer. The Marine nodded. "Thank you," he said. She shook her head. "Thank you," she answered, and meant it in the oldest American way. The way that says we owe one another a standard we can be proud of. And somewhere, in a town that remembered how to stand on a curb, a coin caught the setting sun and held it for a beat longer than physics would allow.